This conference will now be recorded.
Hi, Eric.
Hi, Kathy.
Have you met Don?
Hi, Don.
Hello.
Hi, Lindy.
Hello.
Hi, Brad.
Hi, Kathy. Sorry, I was in between screens there for a second. Sorry.
Okay.
Hi, Don. Hi, Eric.
You're all
Hi,
right.
April. Hi, Lindy.
Hi,
Nice to see
everyone.
you. Well, Kathy, I thought the disability education seminar series on Tuesday went very well.
I thought it did too, and I heard from a number of people that also thought that. So
Well, good. I'm glad to hear that.
I've got the recording ready to go onto our website, but I found out the person that does our website is on vacation. So she won't be able to do it till the beginning of next week.
Well, case
Better than never. Hi, Sarah.
Hey, Sarah.
Hello, Kathy. How are you?
Fine.
Good.
Just got off one of the educational series.
How did it go?
Good. We did 3 this week for disability employment awareness.
Awesome.
And then next week we're doing one person-centered planning and how DHHS plans to implement.
And what time is that?
1 o'clock Thursday afternoon.
Okay. So Rhonda Heights, one of the parent resource coordinators on our team, is working with, Eric, you might have to help me. I know that she was at our tribe board meeting. Her daughter, Erin.
Mary Phillips.
Thank you. Yep. Mary Phillips is doing kind of a presentation for us. So
Yeah, no, this Jennifer Perkins and another person, Jillian. I'm not sure of her last name. Are supposed to be there representing DHHS.
good.
So it should be interesting.
It's always
And
interesting.
the following week is our meeting with Tony.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, Marla.
Hey, Kathy, how are you?
Fine, how are you?
I'm good.
How are the kids?
They're great.
Marla, this is Sarah. How old are your kids now? It's hard to keep track.
Ariana is 14 and August is 11.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I bet your kids are old too.
I know, right? I have a 21-year-old. That doesn't seem possible.
Oh, yeah, that's gotta feel weird.
Hmm.
Well, why don't we get going? And then if a few other people pop in, that would be great. If not, we'll go with what we got. Welcome, everybody. Thanks again for being able to participate in our steering committee meeting here. We'll just take a moment to go around and do introductions. I'm Eric Evans. I'm the CEO at Disability Rights Nebraska. And I'm at this point kind of coordinating this initiative here to see what we can do to establish supported decision making as an alternative to guardianship and conservatorship in Nebraska. We are fortunate to have working with us Jonathan Martinez. So Jonathan, if you would introduce yourself.
Afternoon, everybody. I'm Jonathan Martinez. I'm the Senior Director for Law and Policy at the Burton Blatt Institute. Very happy to be here and honored to be working with you.
Thanks. Lindy, you want to go next?
You bet. Hello, I'm Lindy Foley, and I am the Director for Nebraska VR.
Okay. And I'm just going to follow the screen here. So Sarah?
My name is Sarah Swanson, and I'm faculty at the Monroe-Meyer Institute, which is the state you said.
Okay. Marla?
Hi, I'm Marla Fisher. I am the Deputy Director for the Office of Public Guardian.
And Tony?
Tony Green, I'm the Director for the Division of Developmental Disabilities.
Okay. And Edison, you're up next.
Edison McDonald, I'm the Executive Director for the ARC of Nebraska.
And Mark?
I'm Mark Shriver. I'm the Director of the USAID at the Monroe-Meyer Institute.
All right. And Kristen?
Good afternoon. I'm Kristen. I'm the Director for the Nebraska Council on Developmental Disabilities.
And Don?
I am Don Dew. I am the incoming Executive Director for the Nebraska Statewide Independent Living Council.
And Kathy?
And I'm Kathy Hall. I am the current Executive Director for the Statewide Independent Living Council for 2 months.
So you're the outgoing director if Don's the ingoing director. Is that correct?
I'm gone.
You're already gone. Okay. And Brad?
I am Brad Murins. I'm the Public Policy Director at Disability Rights Nebraska.
Yeah. And then April.
I'm April Peterite. I'm the Program and Administrative Assistant for Disability Rights Nebraska.
And April will be taking our minutes for the meeting. And thank you, April, for taking minutes of the last meeting. And it's very helpful when you're running a meeting not to have to try to manage the meeting as well as take the notes. So it's much appreciated. I did send out an email that had an agenda for the meeting. Whether we get through the entire agenda or not, I don't know. We have an hour available. And then I also included, along with the minutes, just a list that I kind of started putting together based upon what people have, organizations that people have identified so far in terms of a larger task force. And again, for those of you who weren't at our last meeting, we talked about the two group structures that we'll be using. One is the steering committee, which is this group here that we have today. And the steering committee will be, the force to keep the momentum going and the direction clear for our work. And the task force is going to be a larger group. I'm anticipating it'll be somewhere between 25 and 30 members by the time we get there. I get all the organizations identified, and what the task force will be doing is we'll be looking at them to do the analysis and discussion around those kinds of areas that we identify as the task force. So Jonathan and I had talked earlier, and we definitely don't want the task force to feel as though they're just a rubber stamp for what the steering committee is doing. So that tends to limit or reduce buy-in that we're trying to achieve from these organizations. So just to, anyone have any questions in terms of, at this point, this kind of distinction between the steering committee and the task force? Now, we have, I mean, everybody who's on the steering committee will be on the task force as well. So all the organizations that are represented here will have a seat at both tables. I do want to keep the steering committee at somewhere between 8 and 10 folks, because it's a fairly manageable group to do the kind of work that we'll be engaged in. I know that we have a couple of people from different organizations, from the same organization, Don and Kathy, but that will resolve itself in December in terms of that application. And Don then will be the on the steering committee and task force as well. So at this point, Sarah and Mark, you're from the same organization, and I'll just kind of leave it up to you guys to decide who you want to, you know, and to be at the steering committee meetings, and who you want to be at the staff task force meetings. And at the task force meetings, we can actually have more than one individual from the same entity participate at the task force as well. So that's kind of like the second item on the agenda that I kind of burned through kind of quickly there. Jonathan, do you have any comments regarding the task force and steering committee function?
I think you hit the nail on the head. I think as a steering committee, a big part of our work is going to be not telling the task force what to do, but setting the context for the task force to do its work. So we would, in my opinion, discuss broad-based topics to bring to the task force, who would then hopefully agree with them and then fill in the blanks within them. So if we were to say we want to address increased use of supported decision-making in schools, we would ask the task force to say, how do you think the best way to do that would be?
Yeah, I think at some point, as we get into the actual development of the task force, it may be that we do have some active subcommittees functioning within the task force structure. And as Jonathan pointed out, you know, one of the big areas that I think all of us acknowledge is the role that educators play in this process. We know from stories that parents frequently it's suggested to them that as their child is nearing the age of majority, that special educators or transition specialists may start talking about the need for a guardian or something like that. So again, so education can be a really big focus of that. We need to look at if there are any policy changes that we may need to be making within the states, whether that's legislative or other kind of regulatory changes that could be made. I think tied in with education is an outreach component, making sure that we're getting this idea out to people so that they are aware of this. I don't know how many task subcommittees we might have operating at the task force, but I think with 25 to 30 people, we ought to have a sufficient number that we can run some task forces pretty effectively as well. Another issue that Jonathan and I talked about was having some document, whether we call it a vision document or a mission document or a task force charter, whatever we want to call it, but something that lays out the charge to the task force in a clear way. And something that during that first meeting, we get buy-in and agreement from the members of the task force regarding that particular document as well. So what I'd like to do, at least to initiate a conversation today around what we might want to think about putting in such a document. What kind of direction will that document give? And again, as Jonathan and I talked about this idea of some kind of a vision or mission statement is, you know, are there, what are the desired and measurable or quantifiable outcomes of this supported decision-making initiative? And I think, you know, Jonathan gave a good example just a while ago. As one of the things might be to, you know, increase the awareness or or educate special education staff, transition specialists about supported decision making, with the idea of increasing the utilization of supported decision making for transition age students. Was that fair?
I think that's exactly correct. I think the idea, the exercise is, if we do our job well, if everything goes right at this time in 2023, what will have happened? So a really good measurable outcome, just building on what Dr. Evans said, I think would be this, is that at this time in 2023, there will be a policy or a practice in the school, in the Department of Education, that schools will provide information about supported decision-making and other alternatives to guardianship as a part of the transition planning process, period. That's measurable, it's specific, it has an action step, and we can say we work toward that. I think if we were to develop 3 to 5 of those, it would really guide our work going forward.
So
I really like. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, Edison, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I really like your idea of metrics. For those of you who know me, I always want good quantifiables. I think one of the best ones that I know of that we have is within the core indicators, that number of folks in guardianships, and either decreasing that number or, you know, and I'd love to see, like, if in the core indicators we could start tracking the number of people in supported decision-making structures. I don't know, HHS and MMI folks, if that's something that's possible.
One, do you track people going into guardianship in your state? Most states do not. That's one of the great problems, is lack of data.
We do have a question. We do have a question.
I can weigh in on the guardianships a little bit. So back in about 2015, when the Office of Public Guardian was being established, the state at that time actually did try to quantify the number of existing guardianships. And I think it's consistently been around about 10,000 across the state with about, and then we're in charge of educating new guardians every year. And we do about, I think we educate about 1,100 or so per year.
I think that's great to track, and that would be a great measurable, a decrease in the number of people under guardianship. The one I would caution against is trying to quantifiably track the number of people using supported decision making, unless we as a group decide that supported decision making is and must be a structure, like with a form, a formal process. My personal opinion, but I'm happy to discuss, is that that could be an example of supported decision making, but far more often, SDM is something that is done informally amongst families and amongst friends, and we shouldn't leave people doing that out of account. We should be reaching out to more of those folks and encouraging it more often.
I like that idea, because just being as a part of the court system, I can say that the more you put things in writing, the more people might build their case for the need of guardianships, saying that, oh, see, it doesn't go far enough and somebody took advantage and whatever. So we might write ourselves into a direction we don't want to go.
With the caveat that I am not in the majority on this, several other states view this differently than I do. My great concern about requiring a writing for supported decision making is that someday there's going to be a very smart lawyer who, when someone says, I don't need a guardianship, I use supported decision making, and that lawyer says, where's your form? If you don't have a form, you're in guardianship. And Jenny Hatch doesn't have a written supported decision making agreement, doesn't want one. And my standard line to states is, if the patron saint of supported decision making would be in guardianship under your law, we need to rethink the law.
So I hear you, and I kind of like that, but I also, I don't know, I have this concern that most of the attorneys that we talk to, I don't see enough proactive thought and energy. And when while I think that may make sense idealistically, practically, I just see over and over and over again, unless there's a form, it kind of gets hung out there. I think last time I talked about how with person-centered planning, great example, like we've had this amazing training done for so many folks, but until there's actually a check mark box, it seems like it doesn't really happen. And I think that's an unfortunate reality. I think kind of in an ideal world, I think you're on the right track, Jonathan. The other thing that I worry about is, as we I guess I'm wondering more about is, so if we did go and look at just saying, let's, track decreased guardianships instead of trying to track the number of increased supported decision-making structures, I'm trying to understand kind of a ballpark, because, like guardianship isn't the right setup for everybody. Supported decision-making isn't the right setup for everybody. Jonathan, any thoughts as to what that balance might be?
Yeah, a compromise, actually. And I think your points are well taken. People like forms. I actually like agreements and forms. My concern is mandating them, is saying that supported making can only happen and only exist if we have a form. So given that this is kind of a foundational issue, how about this as a compromise? If we go this route, the position we ought to take, my recommendation, is saying that if it winds up in legislation, that supported decision making can be encompassed in an agreement. We can even say policy wise it should be, but as I've recommended in other states, caveat language in the bill saying that nothing requires that a person must have a form in order to use supported decision-making, and not having a form cannot be used against a person in a guardianship case who claims he uses supported decision-making. That way we can encourage it. We can create model forms. I think that would be a great idea. As advocates, we can educate people on good language, but the second we require it, we're going to leave a lot of people behind, because there are poorer people. I mean, there are states right now who have requirements of forms that have to be notarized. And I've said, how many of your people who are in poverty have access to notary publics? You know, or I have to work through 2 witnesses in a specific form. How many have access to the lawyers? So let's not leave people behind. I think it's great to encourage but not require. And on that note, Edison, how about this? If we are going to encourage SDM through forms, you can track the number of people who have entered into that, realizing that it's a non-exclusive amount of people who may be using it informally.
Yeah, no, I like that idea, and I think you're right. I mean, one of the biggest benefits I see of supported decision making potentially is to mitigate that cost of entering into a guardianship. And for so many families, I see that as a huge benefit. I'm not sure, you know, the attorneys will agree with that necessarily. But yeah, I think that's a better track to head down.
The attorneys will oppose you. There will be attorneys who will try to kill any legislation you pass, which, by the way, strategically speaking, may be a question of whether or not you want to go the legislative route or whether you want to go the policy and practice route. I think in the presentation I gave in our first meeting, I pointed out how supported decision-making can actually fit within the structure of your law as it exists now. So that's a strategic question. I know some states have gone full bore for SDM in very specific ways. Others, like Missouri, have recognized supported decision-making without defining it in a particular way. Virginia has said that courts must rule out supported decision-making before putting someone in guardianship without any specific definition of what it is. I think that's a great discussion for us to have going forward. I think it's a task force discussion as well.
Mark, you were going to comment.
Oh, just Edison had asked at the very beginning if NCI collects data on guardianship, and it does related to guardianship, limited guardianship. There's a question or 2 on that, and there are ways we can add questions in consultation with DHHS as well to get at that.
The National Core Indicators absolutely has a guardianship question, but the problem is it doesn't get to the entire state. It's just people receiving state services. Although, as everyone knows, the NCI data is so powerful on similarly situated people who do and don't have guardians and the difference in their quality of life.
So, Mark, does that it's guardianships and conservatorships? Does it also ask about other alternatives to guardianship?
I don't know if it was my speaker or your mic, but I didn't quite catch all of that. But I think you were asking if it had additional alternatives too. I don't recall that it does. Tony, do you know? And I can ask Rachel, and I'll find out more about it before our next meeting.
So the NCI question will ask if they have a guardianship, and then it will say full or partial, I think are the choices that are in the NCI. Off the top of my head, I remember those 2 categories.
That's what I remember too, but.
So at some future point, we could perhaps add a question to the NCIS asking if people have a supported decision-making arrangement.
Yeah, I believe we could. We do that. We usually ask DHHS what additional questions we want to have on there.
Yeah, I think if there was a definition and a way that evaluators can get at what that means, right? So if everybody without a guardianship, do you assume they're in supported decision making? So I think we'd have to define kind of for the evaluators at MMI, when do you check the box or when do you not check the box?
Yeah. And this would be several years out.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of that. Once we've got the policy and practice in place, it would just be one data set that we could track utilization of SDM.
Right.
Tony, I'm thinking back to my own experience going through the school system, and I was fortunate in that we had service coordination before he was 21 because of some other concerns, but his service coordinator at the time was also very pivotal in that role of discussing guardianship. Is it something that's included in the service coordination form, or if it is, and I know it would only catch a handful of kids because not very many children are on the waivers, but that might be another route to consider in addition to hitting the transition or special education folks.
Yeah, I think, that our state service coordinators will play a key role in supporting this with those transition educators as well, because that's really where parents are getting a bulk of their information, at least here in Nebraska, when you're transitioning from kind of your special ed program, getting age of majority, now you're moving into extended services to 21. That's when all of those conversations occur. And so I can tell you, just on a side note, I think most of you all know, not perhaps Jonathan, but I've been out doing a statewide tour the last 3 weeks that we do every year just to get feedback. And I always tell them kind of, here's what's coming up in the next year. And we've been talking at each of the town halls across the state about bringing supported decision making to Nebraska and watching for the opportunities to train and all of that. And there has been very, very positive feedback and folks very interested in this. Even in some of our rural communities, I was surprised to have families that said, my county attorney was just talking to me about not doing full guardianship and just getting power of attorney over medical, because that's where my son's going to really struggle. And I said, that's the conversations we're looking to have, is trying to take each person individually and figure out how much oversight is needed. And so it's really been a kind of a nice couple weeks as people have I think we're going to have, at least from our advocates and families, hopefully support.
That's tremendous news. I was talking to Dr. Evans about that the other day. And one of the things I said is that the good news for us in our work is so much of the groundwork has been laid. As you said, Mr. Green, this is no longer an absolutely foreign topic. There are people who have heard of it, who are interested in it, and who are welcome to the concept. Should, for example, Nebraska pass a law tomorrow, they would be the 15th jurisdiction in the country. So there is good groundwork and good variety. I think it's fair to say, if we're not over the hump yet of acceptance, we're darn near it. So I think as we work on this, we have a very strong head start on reaching people. I think as we're thinking about the mission statement or the goals that Dr. Evans talked about, it might help to break them down into particular areas. You spurred me on that, Mr. Green, thinking about, should we have specific goals for education and training? We will ensure that X number of people learn about it. Or for legislation, we will advocate for this, for an education policy, for a waiver policy. Maybe that would make sense, especially given that we may be separating the task force up into subgroups.
Hi, this is Lindy from Nebraska VR. I was just going to mention that I see a real opportunity too within VR and our staff who are out working directly with the schools. Just as a reminder, we have VR staff in all the high schools in the state, and we are required as part of our service delivery to students with disabilities to talk about 5 required services, and one of those is, of course, self-advocacy. And just the staff that I've talked to so far, we see a lot of opportunity, a lot of excitement that we could leverage here with that particular service as well. So again, I think just on the student side, looking at those required services to students with disabilities, but then also on the adult side, of course, how well this fits with informed choice. So just a few linkages there that I wanted to make sure to point out, and certainly some things we could be doing within VR to help support this work going forward.
Ms. Foley, you are the first VR representative I have ever heard talk about alternatives to guardianship and self-advocacy in the context of PREETs. I know of more VR folk, not in your state, around the country, who don't even know what PREETs are or that self-advocacy is one of the required supports. So God bless you. I was literally talking to teachers and parents from Ohio yesterday, and the vast majority had never heard of PREET. So you're absolutely right. I've always said informed choice is a great definition of supported decision-making if you look at the reg. And the things about in PREETs, gaining social skills, independent living skills, and self-advocacy are a great opportunity for this as part of the transition planning process. And I think WIOA gives you a natural linkage with the schools to work together on it. I would absolutely love to talk to you about opportunities for that.
I think that it really is the overall intent when we start talking about the life after school at an earlier age. And of course, in our state, the transition age was just recently moved from age 16 or younger, if appropriate, to 14. So a lot of things playing in our favor right now, I believe. And so it's just an exciting time to be having this discussion. So thank you.
So I appreciate this discussion and conversation here. I'm thinking that we've got some, we've got some ideas for what of examples of measurable and quantifiable outcomes for the initiative, and we've also had some discussion about various pathways for getting there. Focusing on transition personnel in the schools. Do you think it would be helpful if we sent out since we don't have all of our steering committee members here, we can send out the recording of today's meeting to those folks that weren't able to attend. But we could also do some kind of a survey too, where we could ask people to give us their ideas about measurable or quantifiable outcomes for this, and various and the pathways questions. So we could at least reach out to the other members of the task of the steering committee and kind of see if we can get any feedback from them. And then at our next meeting, we can kind of maybe have a draft for discussion. Does that sound like a reasonable approach? Okay. And I'm noticing here that we've got about 25 minutes left here. And we can come back if we have a little bit of extra time here. And I did send out a list of tentative, a tentative listing of groups that we might want to think about extending an invitation to be on a task force. And I feel I'm embarrassed because I did not put People First of Nebraska on the list, so I'm owning up to that. But they are there now. So are there other, and looking at that list, are there other entities that you think we should be reaching out to as well? And I'm not sure, I'm not necessarily committed to all the entities that are on the list. I have the Nebraska Bankers Association. But Jonathan, when you and I were talking, you said, they could be a point of resistance out there.
They were in Kansas. Kansas had a bill that was moving along nicely, and essentially the bankers killed it. I would recommend at the beginning of this process, we don't think about playing defense. If we move toward legislation, then I absolutely agree broadening the tent. My recommendation would be at the beginning of this, at least, as we're still in a very formative idea-based stage, we keep it pretty tight. As we're moving forward, absolutely, doctors, bankers, lawyers, the ones that are what I call guardianship drivers, should be involved in the hope of winning over enough of them. In Tennessee, I was literally tasked to go talk to the lawyers. So I think there's benefit in that later. But if we're thinking now about who might oppose us, we're not thinking about the good stuff that we could be doing. And I think I'd recommend focusing on that for now.
Okay. So, we could take, saying is I could take the bankers off the list at this point.
I got nothing against bankers, but I don't really know that they're mission critical right now.
Okay. How about the bar?
So are you saying you want to take the Bar Association off for now?
No, we're talking about the bankers right now. Okay. The next question.
Yeah, no, I heard that the bankers you included attorneys in that list of folks who might be opposed.
Yeah, so
that is have opposed and will oppose, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't bring in at least people who we know are well versed in this or who are at least open to the idea at the front end. What I'm recommending is not having our battles just yet with opponents, rather looking at building friends. I'll guarantee you there's lawyers out there that are very broad thinking and who could be friendly and who could be ambassadors to the bar. We should be seeking them out.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I've already talked with a couple of key attorneys in that arena, and I think we have some really great leaders who will help to push us in a positive direction. I think they're going to come with some conditions and thoughts, but I guess I want to make sure I can see the argument on holding off on bankers, but I think bringing in the bar quickly and early as a partner, I just don't see how we move forward without them as a key part of the early conversation.
Being an attorney myself and knowing how our guardianship cases go on a daily basis, I would say bringing in the bar early as a whole is probably not a good idea. But if we have some friendly attorneys who can kind of see things a little bit more through our lens, that might be a place to start. But that's kind of a handful.
That's absolutely my recommendation. Is there's no reason to romance the bar writ large, but there's absolutely reason to involve lawyers who might be friendly to our cause, who could be ambassadors to the bar eventually.
Yeah.
I was wondering, Eric, along the same lines of self-advocacy and Lindy, if perhaps Nebraska Youth Leadership Council could also be included in that. And the reason I think that is a lot of times, often those young leaders do presentations in schools. So it would be great to get them that information and educate them. And then they have direct access to giving presentations to their peers in various schools.
Okay.
Excellent idea.
Does anybody have any friendly attorneys that they would like to recommend?
I mean, David Rowe definitely, and Seamus Kelly, everybody knows, and Amy Bond. Another one who I just had a conversation with the other day who expressed a lot of interest and is a big estate attorney is Andrew Loudon. And as we were kind of talking about the concept, he was really excited. He's like, he's a big civil rights, sort of conservative minded individual who says, that overall, like, guardianships are too restrictive, and he has some concerns about like how constitutional they are, and so we were talking about that, so he might be another good one.
I wonder about like the Down Syndrome Association of the Midlands, because I think they could disseminate some great information across their networks. There's also the Autism Society of Nebraska.
Yeah, I have them on the list.
Oh, you do have them. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just didn't get all of the disability related associations.
I get it.
And I think that would be I think having those organizations would be very helpful, because that would then also be a constituency that we would target for education.
Mm-hmm. Eric, do you have anybody from like the AAAs? I know you have the Office of Guard, or the Ombudsman's Office.
We have Cynthia Braumeyer.
Okay.
Okay, who's on this, and I just didn't put aging services on that, right? Okay. So DHHS, aging services. Yep. Is it aging services, Tony, or is it Division on Aging? What do they call themselves now? You know?
Cynthia's with the State Unit on Aging.
State Unit on Aging. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Okay. So again, we don't have to exhaust this today, but what I'm trying to do is get a handle on who we're going to invite, because in November we're going. I'd really like to be able to have a task force meeting this quarter. So that leaves us from about November 1st to December 15th to try to pull the first task force meeting together. It will be a virtual task force initially. But I'd like to try to pull that together by December 15th. So that's why getting some closure on this within the next 10 days or so would be nice.
Eric, it's Lindy again. Do we have parent training and information, PTI Nebraska, don't we?
Yes, it's at the bottom of the list. Yes.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
I did put the VOR chapter on this. Again, there was some initial vibration within the VOR chapter here. Representatives came to the tri-board meeting. They left early, so they must have not felt as threatened as they thought they were going to feel when they came in. But I don't know for sure. Anybody else have a take on that? Mark or Kristen, or Sarah, have you heard anything from Joe or anything like that? Yeah. Tony, have you heard anything? Have you heard any rumblings from Joe on supported decision making?
No.
No. I hear plenty of other rumblings, but not.
He expressed he did
Eric,
send
Go
ahead, Edison.
I had lunch with him right after that, and he, as long as we keep to it's not the right fit for everybody, but for some people it could be great. I think he sounded very supportive as we talked more about that.
And that was consistent with my conversation with them afterwards as well.
Yeah, in other states, I've pitched VOR on exactly that. I mean, I've said we're never going to agree on things like Olmsted, but your opposition to Olmsted is it's against choice. Supported decision making is about choice. You know, it's not going to be for everyone, but for people who choose to do it, it should be an option. And it has, you know, I think that's got resonance. Again, I don't know if we want to have them on the front end, but they're definitely somebody I'd rather have inside of my tent throwing water out than the converse, if possible. So maybe we bring them in when you think it's appropriate.
Okay, all right. Okay, any thoughts on the tentative list?
My only other thought, Eric, is to, and maybe with Tony here, just to remind everybody about the person-centered planning training that's going on with Mark Friedman right now that the council is supporting. He, you know, he's part of the advanced sessions, will be a session on the emerging role of supported decision-making coming up. And then he's going to be training self-advocates how to lead their own person-centered planning meeting. And then, of course, the division is going to be coming up with some concrete ways of how this is evolving. So, you know, to Edison's point, well, he doesn't see it yet. Well, it's evolving. It's getting there. And I just wonder if you think there would be value in inviting Mark. It wouldn't be in his contract, so he wouldn't have to show, but that he is definitely supporting it in other avenues through the, you know, training through person-centered planning. So.
Yeah, I think it would be fine to extend an invitation to Mark to, and even if he can't be an active participant, to keep him in the loop in terms of what's happening.
Eric.
Kathy.
Eric, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, what about the 2 centers for independent living? Since now under WIOA, they're supposed to be doing transition.
Oh. Okay, they're on the working list. Boom. Any other ideas for the, I'm going to call this a working list right now. Jonathan and I can have a conversation later on and then come back to you with a revised list. Again, we don't have to do this today, but one of the things we need to do is plan the first task force meeting. And I don't know if everybody, if you want to do that as a large group, or if you want to, you know, delegate that to a smaller group of 3 or 4 people who are here today, and then we can come back with we can send out a draft agenda. Do you want to hold off on that until we meet again, or do you want to delegate it to a smaller group to have a conversation about that first meeting have a conversation with Jonathan about that first task force meeting?
I kind of wonder if that first agenda or first meeting is going to be driven to a large extent by whatever we come up with in terms of, you know, those measurable outcomes and mission. It's whether we have to have, would need that first to help guide what would happen.
Yeah, and I think I mean, I'm thinking more as a tentative outline, just so that we kind of have we can have an early discussion about maybe what we want to see on that there, and it might be an agenda item that says, you know, presentation and discussion of charter or something like that. So we don't have to get into the nitty gritty necessarily, but so I guess what I'm saying is, anybody want to be involved in that, or do you want to delegate that to Jonathan, Brad, and I.
Just speaking on, reflecting back on the Tri-Board Council meeting that we had, the presentation you shared, Jonathan, was fantastic. And I think that that would definitely be something to include in the first task force meeting to get people kind of caught up who weren't necessarily part of that training, just to get a good sound foundation of what supported decision making is.
I'm always happy to hear my own voice.
Sarah had raised a question about whether to extend an invitation to the Nebraska affiliate of the National Alliance for Mental Illness. And, you know, I've struggled with that because on the one hand, a lot of the issues that people with mental illness deal with are around treatment.
Mm-hmm.
And we now have this new advanced directives for mental health care in Nebraska that allows greater self-determination in the treatment process. But the reality is that they're also subjected to guardianships because of financial issues and things like that. I guess I'm open to that, but I don't know for sure if it will resonate as much with folks as the advanced directive stuff resonates with them. So what do people think? Yeah.
Eric, I know NAMI used to be very parent driven.
Mm-hmm.
It is.
Still.
I'm not familiar with the executive director. I think there's been some leadership changes. I just don't know where they'll come in with a position. So I think it's, Eric, if you've considered it, that's the only reason I listed it. It's just something to consider.
Yeah, and I think at some point it might be good to bring them in. I don't know if they might be like the bankers. I don't know.
Yep. I kind of agree with you, I think.
Yeah, this is Don. I agree with that too.
Yep.
But it's good to keep them in mind.
Yeah, and Brad, you've had at our office, you've had the greatest contact with the NAMI folks, and my sense is that they have not. They've had a hard. That they struggle with being an organization to some degree. Is that still the case?
Yeah, I think so. I think they're, still kind of in a transition, trying to get, some stability and all that. Although I do think it might be interesting to make the argument that if we're looking at the idea of, maybe part of the advanced mental health directive is to develop a support decision-making agreement. So I think there may be some organic linkages between the NAMI side, the mental health side, and the support decision making. And I think we can also incorporate the advanced directives in there as well. But yeah, I think they should be involved, but I'm not so sure at what point.
Okay.
I think Brad makes a fantastic point about the way psychiatric advanced directives interplay with supported decision making. The scholarship on it is that PADS are permutations of SDM. If whatever comes to that, I work very closely with one of the leaders in the PAD movement. I'm actually co-leading a project statewide in California with her. I think she would be a great addition to at least present to the group on the interplay between PADS and SDM, and maybe serve as a bridge between other organizations.
Who are you working with, Jonathan?
Her name's Laurie Hallmark. She has been published on PADS multiple times and has lectured throughout Texas and California and Virginia and consulted on PAD projects.
And it's Hallmark?
It's HALLMARK, Laurie,
right.
L-A-U-R-I-E. I can send you
Yeah.
a link to an article she and I wrote on PADS and SDM. I'll try to find
Great.
it.
Great. We just passed a advanced directive bill 2 years ago, right, Brad? And we're actually have contracted with a consumer operated organization to go out and do education on psychiatric advanced directives. So we might want to think, as we're playing with this idea right now, we might want to think about how SDM might also be part of the conversation when we go out there. So
I just put a link in the chat box to an article Laurie and I wrote about a PAD project she worked in Texas that actually talks a lot about the interplay between PADS and SDM. I absolutely think as an implementation model, it's a great idea.
great. All right. We're nearing the end of our time here. Again, I appreciate everybody for hanging in. The last question I have is I put the wrong date. That should be September of 2022. And what I'm really asking is, I'd like to kind of set a routine monthly meeting for this group, and was just curious if you just want to do it at the end of this meeting, we'll set the next one, or do you want to set a schedule out for the upcoming year? And would you want to do like the fourth Thursday of every month at 3 p.m. or something like that? So, you know, give me some sense of how this would best work for you.
A regularly scheduled time each month would work best for me, typically. So I know
think
what's
it's a
coming.
good idea, with the caveat that schedule permitting on certain meetings if things come up. But I like the idea of having a regular date for us. The fourth Thursday in November is Thanksgiving, but I'm sure we can do that.
Yeah. In fact, I would like to have us meet, you know, no later than the third week of November. Okay, and then we could set, I mean, if we could set a mid-month meeting date, that would probably be helpful.
I'm guessing that most of our schedules have more flexibility in the afternoon, later afternoon, like right now, as opposed to midday.
So if we would look at the, you know, the midpoint of the month, say somewhere between somewhere around the 15th, 16th, 17th of November, does any of those do any of those days work for you? In the late afternoon.
15th.
The 15th or the 16th.
15th works for me.
15th, yeah.
So it looks like we might be able to do something on the 15th.
Yeah. That's a Monday, correct? Yep.
Yeah, it's a Monday. Yes. Yes. All right. And then in the late afternoon, this time slot, 3 to 4 works.
Yeah.
And does that, so that would do that. And then in December, that means we would meet like December 13th, 14th, or 15th. Or actually, we're talking about that would be Monday, December 13th would be our next meeting.
That's good for me.
Yep, that works.
Okay, and then January. We,
Yeah, the December date won't work for me, so, but I can find somebody else to go.
okay, all right. And then January, probably the 17th.
That's Martin Luther King Day. I mean,
Oh, well, it is, isn't it? Yeah, it is. Yeah. Okay.
I'm okay with that.
So the 10th,
works.
Yep, that works.
okay, the 10th, so February, we're down to the, we'd be at the 14th. I know that's Valentine's Day, but that would be the next one. March would be the 14th. April would be, we could probably meet on the 18th in April, or the 18th or the 11th. Any preference? Why don't we go with the 11th then, actually? May, we'd be looking at the 16th. June at the 13th. July at the 11th or the 18th, probably the 11th again. I'm pretty free after July, or from July through September. And then the 15th of August and the 12th of September. So we will send out that as dates. And again, all these are this is our best guess at this point of time when these meetings are going to occur, but if we need to have some flexibility, it's there. Any other business that people want to? There being none, perhaps the best part of any meeting, the adjournment. So everyone, thank you so much for your time today. Jonathan, I'll give you, we have our fiscal year kickoff meeting tomorrow where all staff get together and we talk about what we're going to be doing, what everyone's going to be doing over the course of the next year. So all of our staff have a sense of what we're doing as an organization. But I'll give you, I'll get a hold of you next week, and then we can have a follow-up conversation with regard to today's meeting and what we need to be doing.
Great. I'm on trial tomorrow anyway, so next week is actually much better for me.
That's right. All right, great. So thank you so much, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.